Welcome to OLC 4.0. This is term 1A. We are in class 15. Today we're going to be looking at assignments A20, 21. My text says they're not being heard. It seems to be out. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Yeah, okay. All right, I'm going to start that over. I'm not sure what's going on there. Welcome to OLC 4.0, Term 1A. This is Class 15, and we are looking at assignments 20, 21, 22, and probably 23. We're also going to be looking at comparative versus superlative adjectives today, and I am Jillian Percy. All right, contact information. If you want to call in, talk to me while I'm on air, 1-800-465-7144. If you want to call and talk to me when I'm not on air, you would call 1-800-667-3703, and my extension is 2211. You can also email me, jillian.percy@nnec.on.ca. If you're sending assignments, don't send it to my email. Send it to the group email, which is studentwork@nnec.on.ca. That way the secretary can log that you submitted work. On every assignment, please make sure you include your full name, the course name, the assignment number, and name. Also, if it asks for a rough and a good draft, please hand them both in at the same time and make sure it's labeled which is which, because they often have different marking schemes and a different amount of marks, okay? If you need to take a photograph of an assignment, please send it as an attachment. Don't just take the picture and send it directly to me as an email. It's very hard to print off and it doesn't show properly in the computer. I apologize if you're getting any kind of static. I'm sort of periodically getting static today. Okay, YouTube channel. YouTube channel is capital G, capital P, ERCY, space, capital W, AHSA. Here's what it looks like. If you go to the section called playlists, you will see this 2024, 2025, OLC 40, term 1A. That's my playlist for the course I'm doing right now. The other playlists are for courses that happened last year. Having said that, if you get beyond the assignments we're doing now, you can always go back and look at some of last year's assignments to see if they can help you out. There's even other courses there, like English 4E is already there from last year, and I won't be teaching that for another few weeks. So that's one way you can do it. Now, we also are just in the process of developing a new WASA YouTube channel, and it looks a lot like this. Currently, there's only 2 playlists on there at the moment, the OLC 40 playlist and the MAP 4C, Foundations for College, but eventually we will have all of them there. It's just there's a limit as to how many videos we're able to upload during a day. Here is the link for it if you're wanting to enter that link into your browser. Okay, so learning goals for today. By the end of today's class and assignments, I will write complete and correct sentences, including how to use superlative and comparative adjectives, use knowledge of the organizational structure and features of textbooks to locate main ideas and specific information, choose an appropriate approach to reading a text to match the purpose for reading, use appropriate pre-reading strategies to review new texts, including informational texts, use appropriate strategies to locate information in different types of texts, including informational text and graphic texts. Ooh, sorry, not rolling off the tongue there today. And then use strategies to make inferences about and interpret different types of text, including informational, narrative, and graphic texts. Now, if you're asking, oh my goodness, why do we have so many learning goals today? It's because we're probably going to cover between 3 and 4 assignments. They're kind of quick assignments and they're all sort of related, so they're pretty easy to teach together, but that's why you've got sort of so many learning goals. They're not all kind of based on the first one. All right, so as always, we're working on complete and correct sentences, and today we're going to talk about superlative and comparative adjectives. Comparative adjectives are used when you're comparing 2 things to each other. For example, my son is taller than my daughter. Taller than is the comparative adjective. For regular comparative adjectives, we simply add er to the end of the base adjective. For longer adjectives, we are more likely to use the adverb more or less in front of the adjective. My new boss is more positive than my last boss. That girl is less negative than she used to be. Okay. So basically, if it's longer, we generally use more or less. If it's shorter, we just add the ER or later on EST. Because if you say like positive-er or negative-er, it ends up just sounding kind of silly, right? There are some irregular comparative adjectives, in other words, ones that don't follow the rules. So good becomes better in its comparative form. Like if I say, this pizza place is better than the one down the street, that's how we would do it. I wouldn't say gooder. Well can also become the word better, interestingly enough, but that one is talking about healthiness. So he was pretty sick for a while, but he is better now. Bad becomes worse in its comparative form. That computer virus is worse than the last one we had. And then little becomes less when we're talking about comparing two things. You get less chips in the bag than you used to. Some irregular comparative adjectives have two different formats depending on how you meant it. So old can become elder if you're referring to members of the same family, like she is the elder sister. But old can also become older if you're just talking about people in general. My new coworker is older than me. Far can become further or farther. This one is kind of controversial. I tried to get a definitive answer and I really couldn't. Some people use these interchangeably. Other people feel that we should only use farther for very specific distances. So for them, they would say Bronson is 120 kilometers farther west than Wisteria on that highway. Those people feel that further should either be used figuratively or for non-specific distances, like the blueberry patch is further into the meadow than the raspberry bushes. That isn't anything that's going to get marked. I'm just kind of showing that there's differences. Okay, superlative adjectives. These are used once you're comparing three or more than three things. Now, in the regular form with short adjectives, we just add est, est. He is the tallest guy in the room. Now, if the adjective happens to end with a Y, we change that Y to I, and then we add our est. So busiest, happiest, silliest, craziest. We just never leave the Y there. And then with longer adjectives, we again use most for the one that has the most of whatever quality of a group of things, and least for whatever has the littlest amount of the same quality. So I could say, this is the most delicious cake I have ever eaten. That dress is the most expensive one in the shop. So I usually explain what I'm comparing it to. The most delicious cake I have eaten. The most expensive dress in this shop. So that's what you have to kind of specify what your group is, basically. Okay, some superlative adjectives also have irregular formats. Oh, this is sounding so weird. Less becomes least. So I might say that is the least expensive car in the lot. Bad becomes worst. That is the worst fish I have ever eaten. Good and well both become best. He was the best in his class at woodworking. She is the best she has ever been at since the surgery. All right, superlative adjectives can also have irregular formats. Old can become oldest if you're just talking generally, like he is the oldest guy in class, or old can become eldest if I'm talking about a family, like she is the eldest of all the sisters. I don't know why we use two different ones for that one. It just seems to be one of those things we've developed. Far can become farthest or furthest. And same thing, there seems to be some discussion as to what's the proper usage. I will happily take either. I don't think it's that crucial, to be honest. Okay. Oh, hang on, So we have moved to, I can use knowledge of the organizational structure and features of textbooks to locate main ideas and specific information. Okay, so lesson 7 is all about reading strategies. And back in lesson 3, we had a little cloud where we filled in the different forms of reading. Maybe you included the word textbooks. Believe it or not, writers of textbooks do try their best to make reading their pages simple And yet often students struggle with finding the information they need. There are certain features that most writers of textbooks include to help students, but often those features are not appreciated because they're misunderstood. So for example, look at all the details in the sample of a textbook page on page 12. The amount of information crammed onto one page can make you tired before you even begin reading. So one way to help yourself understand a textbook better is to check out what's called its text features, okay? There are all these little formatting tricks and tips that they use to try and make it easier, but it doesn't necessarily work for everybody. I don't know why that keeps coming up. Okay. So assignment 20 is just understanding a textbook. This part is worth 15 marks. And we talk a little bit about skimming and then scanning, sorry. Many people consider skimming and scanning search techniques rather than a reading technique. However, when you're reading large volumes of information, they may be more practical than reading everything word for word. So for example, you might be searching for specific information or looking for clues or just reviewing information to kind of remind yourself about something. Skimming is basically used to quickly identify the main ideas of a text. When you read the newspaper or a textbook, you're not necessarily always reading it word for word. Instead, you're often skimming the text quickly. Skimming is generally done at a speed 3 to 4 times faster than normal reading when you're going word for word. People will often skim when they have lots of material to read in a limited amount of time. Use skimming when you want to see if an article may be of interest in your research. There are many strategies that can be used when skimming. Some people read the first and last paragraphs using headings and summaries as they move down the page or screen. You might read the title, subtitles, subheading, and illustrations. Consider reading the first sentence of each paragraph. This technique is useful when you're seeking specific information rather than trying to comprehend every single detail. Skimming can also work well to help find dates, names, places, or to review graphs, tables, and charts. So the next slide is an example of skimming a text. Oh, wait, that's weird. That didn't happen. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not sure what happened there. Huh. A couple of slides duplicate each other. Okay. So this is a textbook page, chapter 6, taken from a book about Canada, and we are going to use skimming to identify the main ideas or the content of this textbook. We can look at the headings, the subheadings, the graphics, and look at the first and or the last sentence of each paragraph. We end up only using the first because I kind of ran out of room. So the chapter title is Fresh Water, Canada's Special Resource, and then weirdly there's a question mark there. And then the subheading, there's two of them. One says, is fresh water our most important resource? And the next subheading said, who decides how we use our water? Okay. Down here, I see a map. It looks like it's part of Southern Ontario and a little bit over here of the United States. And there's a little caption here that said Nestle Canada bottles water from wells near Hillsborough, Ontario. The source area for both the Grand and the Creed, can't quite read that, rivers. Okay, and then I'm just gonna look at the first sentences of each paragraph. I'm gonna make this a little bit bigger so you can see what I see. Okay, so most of Canada has an abundant water supply. Nestle Canada is a manufacturer of bottled water. In 2011, the permit was renewed, but the government added a new clause. Nestle appealed the rule about mandatory cuts. Okay, hang on a sec. 2 citizens groups decided to challenge the amended agreement in court. So just from what I've got there, if somebody asked me, hey, what's this about? Here is kind of what I would generally say. I'm gonna make this a little bit smaller so we can see it again. This page is not discussion, is or a discussion, I guess. A discussion about how we may think of fresh water as being an important Canadian resource, but we may not have the full rights about who decides how it's used. Otherwise, they wouldn't keep asking that who decides how we use our water. It sounds as if the Nestle company is bottling water near places where our streams would be affected. Canada tried to limit this ability, but Nestle, it sounds like they tried to fight it. They appealed the rule, right? Then later, 2 citizens groups challenged the agreement in court. Now, just looking at this, do I understand everything that happened in this book so far? No, I don't. But it does give me a general idea without having to read every single word. So if I'm trying to do research and maybe I was flipping through this textbook to see, hey, is this chapter going to be useful to me? Then I would know probably fairly quickly, yeah, I want to read about water, or no, that's not really about what I'm working on. So it's not meant to be like a way to skip reading. It's meant to be a way to evaluate a piece of writing to decide if it's going to be useful to you or to find small bits of information. Okay, and then we're looking at scanning. Scanning is a technique you often use when you're looking up a number in the telephone book or a word in the dictionary. You search for key words or ideas. And in most cases, you know what you're looking for. So you are concentrating on finding a particular answer. Scanning involves moving your eyes quickly down the page, looking for specific words and phrases. It's also used when you first find a resource, trying to determine whether it will answer your questions. Once you've scanned the document, you might go back and skim it, which is a little more detailed, right? When scanning, look for the author's use of organizers such as numbers, letters, steps, or words like first, second, or next. Look for words that are bold-faced, in italics, or in a different font style, size, or color. Sometimes the author will put key ideas in the margin. For textbooks in particular, the table of contents can help you find information more quickly. The glossary can help you find definitions. The index can help you locate a certain topic within the textbook, and graphics can give you visual representations of what the text is saying, as well as margin notes and bolded text, which can emphasize important points. Okay, so here's an example. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller so it works here. Okay, so we're going to practice scan a text. We're going to think of a word or a phrase that we're looking for and picture that in our mind. So we're looking for something about Indigenous women. Maybe that's what we're researching. So I'm just looking generally for the word Indigenous. I'm not seeing it here. Oh, wait, Indigenous. So I'm going to kind of back up. No, I don't think about Indigenous women. I'm just talking about Indigenous alliances. Okay, so I'm going to keep on going. Okay, Indigenous people. Now, when I see that, I immediately kind of see sisters, wives, and daughters of merchants, military officers, and political officials were involved in the trade. Likewise, Indigenous people were active participants in the transatlantic market economy. Okay, so this piece is going to be talking about Indigenous women. And that talks about the French relied on Indigenous men and women to hunt fur-bearing animals and to process the furs, washing the furs, scraping off the dirt, flesh, and blood, and stretching them over wood frames to dry was women's work in Indigenous societies. Okay, so if I was looking for this, sometimes if you're like flipping through a chapter, I don't necessarily always need to read every single chapter. I might be flipping through paragraphs really quickly. And then like here, I stopped and slowed down because I saw it did have some of the information that I was looking for. Okay, so that brings us to assignment number 20. I'm going to go look at the questions, but just to show you, in your book, you have this. And this is so small. I don't know about you, but I find this very hard to read. And if you want to see it more clearly, there is a little link in your text, and it's actually much easier to read. Also, on the next page in my slides, I've got an expanded copy. But before we kind of go there, I'm going to kind of read the questions so we have an idea what we're looking for, okay? What is the first thing that catches your attention? What is a subheader? Who wrote The Alphabet versus the Goddess? What is the main idea of this page? What are some of the techniques used on this page to draw your attention to certain areas? What will you usually find at the beginning of most chapters? Name 3 examples of typography. What is the purpose of typography? What types of lists do writers and publishers use? What do students need to know about supplemental information? And finally, why are textbooks frequently color-coded? Okay, hang on. So I'm going to go here because it really is a lot easier to read. Okay, I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. Okay, so what you have is they've written a topic about a textbook page. And then they've got little notes all the way around pointing out all the different text features. So starting at the top, they're talking about sidebars, which offer information that complements but is not always essential to the main text. And it's pointing to the part where there's an objective. This part up top is the chapter or the section heading. It doesn't necessarily have to be in black. There could be a header at the top of each chapter that just kind of goes through the chapter. Here it's talking about Unit 2, developing students' textual intelligence. Icons or symbols. Textbooks will often use these in a standardized way. And like, okay, so maybe, hey, that's going to be part of a journal. Or maybe they would have a part that like had a little lab tool before, hey, this is going to be a lab. Pull boxes. These are kind of similar to sidebars, except they usually are definitely in an actual box. They might feature things about connections, features, strategies, or profiles. Textual organization, okay? Textbook organized information into lists and paragraphs. Here, these words that are boxed indicate different examples of the paragraph's main idea. Words like first, another, or finally help you know that the information is being arranged in sequence. Then down here, you can have supplemental information. Most textbooks now include regular features, things like career connections, technology links, or profiles of important people that were involved in an incident or in that field. Sometimes students don't realize you don't always need to read all that content, only if it's crucial to what you're doing. Color coding. Textbooks frequently color code the book to help readers find their way around. Thus, all the fun facts would use the same kind of color formatting. Reading figures. Down here it says figure 5, number 12. The 5 is telling you what chapter, and the 12 is telling you it's the 12th figure or graphic in that chapter, okay? So one of them could be a map. Another one could be a fun fact. A third one could be a chart. They don't have to all be the same type. Here is a little web link. Down here is a footer, which is telling you what chapter you're on and what the title is. Pre-reading, discussion questions that you want the students to think about before they even start reading. Reading directions. What are they supposed to be doing while they read? Sometimes they might have lists that could be bullet lists, number lists, or check boxes. Vocabulary might tell you different terms you need to know. If you look at the first and last sentences, that will usually tell you the main idea about a paragraph. You can also look at headers and subheaders. Like here's a subheader. Survey says, check for understanding. Even fun facts is kind of a subheader, right? And then find the main idea. If you look in the very first sentence, it's often, they are not always, but often. That's I think a good start. Okay. So then you would go back here and you would tell me, what is the first thing that captures your attention? I noticed the blank. What is a subheader? A subheader is. So try to use complete sentences, not just kind of one-word answers. Keep in mind, some of these are looking for more than one item. Like name 3 examples of typography. You need all 3 to get the full marks. What types of lists? You want to have as many as they mentioned, you want to be in here. If there's more than one answer, put both of them so you get full marks, okay? Okay, moving on to assignment number 21. This is also about textbook features, but now you're kind of putting what you learned in the last assignment into play. To do this, you can select a textbook from any subject that you want to. If you have a learning center, you should be able to find a textbook there. If you are not at a center, but you have like a grade school nearby, they might have some science textbooks or history textbooks. And I will show you later on, there is also some online sources you can find. The table next is called Textbook Feature Analysis, And it's basically a chart. You're going to fill in that chart. It's basically just kind of get you a chance to practice finding those parts and know how to find them. So when you're using textbooks on your own, you can easily find them, okay? Quick point, your novel, Jimmy Comes Home, is not a textbook. Do not use it. It won't work because it doesn't have these kind of text features. If you don't have access to physical copies, like I said, you can find PDFs, and I'll show you some different sites for that. Some of them do demand you be a member, but often it's free. If they want money, obviously don't use them. These are some different textbook links to access things, and if you just kind of check them out, things like Open Textbook Library, you can tell it what you're wanting to look for. Archive.org, sorry, that's another one. What else have we got? Bookboon, I thought that one was free, but it's kind of causing me some problems right now, so I would say don't use this one anymore. Gutenberg, there's a few others out there. You can find some things. So here is a sample textbook. Got a second. Where did I find that? I think this one was connected to somebody's blog. So here it's got literally the entire textbook. Look, 393 pages, right from the very cover to the very first page. So anything this question is asking me, I can find using this PDF, okay? All right, what is the title of the textbook? Who are the authors of the textbook? Now, a lot of textbook will have more than one author. It's pretty common, okay? If you don't have enough room here, you can always just write it on another page. That's fine. How many pages does the textbook have? What is the name of the publisher? That one can be a little bit tricky. Let me kind of go in here and see. Okay, so here, for example, if you look at the authors, there's several authors. Nelson Education is the publisher, but I feel like it should say that. Hang on a second. Yeah, down here, you look at the copyright, it's saying Nelson Education. Textbooks are often copyrighted by the, if it's written by many people, it'll be often by the publisher. If it was written by only one or two, they would probably have the copyright. It would kind of depend, okay? Let's see here. What is the ISBN? All right, so ISBN is usually in one of two places. Hang on. It's usually on the what they call the title page, which is not the very front. This is the title page. So you look down here, and there's actually two ISBNs. We used to only have ISBNs that had 10 numbers, but then we have so many books that now we need 13 numbers. For our sake, I would use the 13 because that is now more accurate. They're showing you the 10-digit number because that used to be accurate. And some people may already be used to that one. Okay, where is it located? Check your textbook. It's not always in the exact same spot every time. Create a citation. Okay, so I wanted to explain this one because I haven't talked about this one much. A citation is when you are telling me about a source that you used to give you information, right? So if you are writing all about alcoholism and you used, Edward Roberts' book on alcoholism and its cures, you want to tell me about that so that I understand that it's not just what you wrote. And you always put the name of the author first, and you do it school style, like last name and then first name. So if it was Robert Edwards, hang on, I'm going to give myself a little text box to go in here. There we go. Robert Edwards, I would put Edwards, comma, Robert, period. Then I would tell you the title of the book. So Alcoholism and Its Cures. And you can see, I'm going to put another period. We underline it to show that it's the title. Okay. Then the publisher's location and the name of the publisher. So up here, where is their location? It's Toronto. Right down here, I can see Toronto. Not just Canada, but Toronto, right? So then I would write, hang on a second, Toronto. Okay, so now it tried to continue to underline. I don't want it to. I'm going to take that off. All right, location, and then I put a colon. And then I put the name of the publisher, which is Nelson, Canada. And then I would put the date of the publication. So when did they write this? 2008. Okay. And then I put another period, and that's a citation. Okay. Where is the table of contents? How is the information in the table of contents organized? How many chapters does your textbook have? Where is the index? How is that information organized? Now, when it says, how is this information, they mean the index. I've had a few people think that they meant the book in general. No, it's referring back to the index, okay? Does the textbook have any other sections at the end of the book besides the index? And they want you to list them. Gosh, this is really bothering me. Oh, wait. Ooh, I think I just fixed it. Oh, okay. It was coming apart or something. Thank you. Woohoo. All right, let's go down to the very end of mine. Let's see what it's got. Oh, it might not. Here we go. Index. There's a glossary. Let me go to there. Won't let me. Index, credits, and then there's a blank page. Okay. Glossary is like a little dictionary. Credits would be kind of often saying thank yous to people who helped you in some way to write the thing. All right. So some of these are worth more than 1 mark. Okay. Things like how is the information organized, the citation part, any other sections, those things are worth a little bit more than 1 mark. But again, that one's pretty easy to do. Okay, so now we are looking at 22, okay? So our learning goals for this assignment is that you can choose an appropriate approach to reading a textbook or text to match the purpose for reading. You can use appropriate pre-reading strategies to preview new texts, including informational texts. And I can use appropriate strategies to locate information in different types of texts, including informational texts and graphic texts. Okay, skimming and scanning for information. For this one, you should not read all the words on the page. They are really expecting you to practice skimming for this. So remember, we practiced skimming already. So you want to look at the headings, the subheadings. You want to look at if there's any pictures. Is there a caption? What's in the picture? And I would generally look at like at least the first sentence of each paragraph. And then write down what you think the passage is about. Remember, you want to convey as many details as possible in that one sentence because it is worth 5 marks. I would try to make sure it includes at least 5 important words about the text. So if I said it's about Canadian history, that's pretty vague. I told you it's Canadian and kind of history. That's maybe 2 marks. That's not really very specific. Remember that you can use compound and complex sentences are a great way to make sentences that include a lot of details. Here are some more examples of sentences that are too vague. These pages are about history. That's 1 mark. You haven't told me whose history, where, what topic, when. These pages are about Canadian history. Okay, that's 2 marks. What part of Canadian history? What are they talking about? These pages are about families. That's 1 mark. So here, people are really naming the topic. We're looking for the main idea about the topic. What are they telling us about Canadian history? What are they telling us about families? Okay. So here's an example. If I said these pages are about plants, not really worth 5 marks. These pages are about how to grow vegetables in the backyard in Canada. Okay, that's much more specific. These pages are about restaurants. That's just the topic. These pages are about restaurants in the Thunder Bay area that accommodate people with food allergies and intolerances. Okay, much more detailed. It gives the reader a much better idea of what's going on. Okay, so I'm going to try and make this a little bit bigger so we can kind of talk about this. Okay. So looking at this page, the history of parenting is often remembered with a nostalgic view, an assumption that it is better than it is now. And then at the end of the paragraph, they say, in contrast, during the later years of the Roman Empire, children might be considered spoiled by today's standards. Children were indulged and fathers made sacrifices to keep them happy. Then we have family history in Canada. We've got a subheading of Aboriginal families. So up here, our first sentence says, to gain a better understanding of Canadian families today, it is necessary to study the changes they've undergone through history. Then down here, we've got family history in Canada begins with the hunter-gatherer societies of the Aboriginal peoples. Hang on. After 1500 BCE, many groups of Aboriginals began to give up their nomadic way of life. Families within the larger group were nuclear in nature. The arrival of the Europeans in North America between 1500 and 1700 meant the end of their former way of life for many Aboriginal groups. Then we go down. The children born of these unions were raised by parents of two different cultures that had very different views on children's roles. The marriages were considered temporary, and when the fur traders returned to Europe, their Aboriginal wives and children would often return to their original families. Okay, so I would keep doing that until I checked through this. For this one, I would also pay special attention to the subheadings, European families. Here's a picture. Children went out to work at a young age since families needed their wages in order to survive. And then have I got any more? Let me see. That's it. Okay. So you want to look at all that and give me a good complex sentence that tells me what is the main idea of this passage. Oh, hang on. Gotta make it smaller. Okay. Okay, to convey the main idea, write a long sentence. Yep, okay, we did this. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, so for example, a simple sentence might be history is awesome. A compound sentence might be joining two smaller sentences together. History is awesome, and I would like to be a historical researcher someday. A complex sentence joins an independent sentence and a dependent sentence. History is awesome because it brings to life the times and events of people living long ago and from different cultures around the world. That's the kind of detailed sentence I'm looking for, okay? Not the history. History is awesome. Okay, question number 2. Now here, you're not going to want to read every single thing, but you're going to use scanning. What were the men and older boys responsible? Look for that phrase, men and older boys were responsible for. And then you would tell me, what were they responsible for? Give 3 reasons why Indigenous family relationships baffled Europeans. I would look for that phrase. Then, why were the families of early Indigenous people considered egalitarian? That means that men and women were considered equals. This is worth 3 marks, so make sure you give me a detailed answer there, okay? Why did European men often live with or marry Indigenous women? Remember that you need to look for what the textbook says, not just your own ideas. Okay, yeah, we did that. Okay, next assignment. I can use strategies to make inferences about and interpret different types of texts, including informational, narrative, and graphic texts. So this is assignment 23, and it's about visuals in informational texts. This one's worth 12 marks. What kind of visuals do you think would best show the following employment data from Statistic Canada's Labor Force Survey 2021? Hint, you might remember making this kind of visual in math class. Sketch the visual, you might need more than one, that you would use. And here's the information they want you to create a graph of. In 2021, approximately 6 million people were working in Ontario, of which 54% were male workers and 46% were female workers. 82% worked full-time, 18% worked part-time, 84% were employees, and 16% were self-employed. Okay, so in the new version, I've put a little spot there so you can put your graphs right there. If you want to do it on a separate page, that's okay. Just I know some people like to write right into the book, and so that's why I try to give you a little spot for that. Now, occasionally this graphing question confuses people because the word sketch. Sometimes people take that to mean just pretend to make a graph. And they'll just do something like this, where there's some lines and there's I don't even know what it's supposed to be. There's no words, there's no numbers. I have no idea what they're really trying to show me. You don't have to get out your ruler and your compass and draw me a perfect graph on graph paper, but it does still need to be a proper graph with labels and numbers telling me what the information is showing us. However, remember that not all graph types are able to show us all the type of information they're asking us to display. So here's an example of a proper circle graph. There's a title, musical preference of students. They've got things graphed and then colored in, and then they've labeled it. Rap, 35%, rock and roll, 28%, alternative, 15%, country, 12%, classical, 10%. Here, they put the numbers on the pie chart, but they put the explanation of what they meant in what they call a key or a legend. If they just did the this with the numbers but didn't tell me what they were, you wouldn't get full marks, okay? The other part would be like possibly bar graphs. Again, they have to have a type, a title. The axes, these are the axes. They should both have labels, colors versus number of children. They should have very clear bars, and there should be either information like numbers or labels like green, blue, red. This is kind of neat because they're just showing you, hey, here's 4 different ways to graph the exact same information. It kind of depends what you're trying to answer. For this one, I'm looking at which color is liked best, right? For this one, I'm kind of more looking at how many children liked each color. For this one, I'm trying to split it up by grade, right? Which colors were liked by grade. And then this one is the same thing, but they're doing it with a bar graph for each color as compared to here where it's what's called like a stacked bar graph. This is a nice type for comparing like, okay, looks like grade 1s liked red best, grade 2s didn't quite like it as much, grade 3s came close. So think about how you want to graph things. One thing to think about is showing an unusual amount on a graph, because we don't write every single number 1, 2, 3, 4 on a graph. We usually put it in groups. It might be groups of 5, 10, 50, 100, depends what you're trying to graph, right? But if I want to show a number like 36 and there is no 36, some people are just doing this. They're coloring in 30 or they're coloring all the way into 40, but that's not accurate. 36 though is pretty close to halfway between 30 and 40. So I would just color a little bit extra than half, and that would be fine, okay? Okay, so then they want you to read this news report and then answer the questions that follow it. This is about Beaver Brae secondary school students and staff host a spring feast and a powwow. And there's a picture of, clearly of the powwow, right? Gonna run out of time here soon. What type of visual is used here? For some reason, people always want to say picture. Picture is not too vague. Like it's too vague. There's way too many things that count as pictures, okay? You might say it's a graph, a map, an ad, a chart, a table, a diagram, a photograph, or a drawing, but do not just say picture, please. I do not give you full marks for that. Why do you think this type of visual was chosen? How is it more useful to the article than other types of visuals? Like, why did they choose this visual instead of a map or instead of a graph? All right, what was the reason? And then you could say things like, I think this type of visual was chosen because it is more useful than other types of visuals because. And then our last question, question number 3 says, What information about the event does the visual add that the words can't? Why do newspapers even bother using any kind of a visual? What kind of information does the specific visual that comes with this news story give us? Sometimes I find that students are kind of confused by the word information because they think of information as something that is all about words. But there is such a thing as visual information, and different visuals can give us different types of information that our eyes can see and our brains can process. So here is an example of a visual that does that. This says life cycle of a frog. Now, the words only say tadpole, tadpole with back legs, tadpole with both back and front legs, froglet, young frog, adult frog. But the visuals show me, okay, here there's tiny little eggs at first. The eggs get kind of bigger. The tadpole is dark and black and has a little tail. Now it's gotten bigger and it's turning green. Now it's a little bit bigger and it's got four little legs. Oh, here it's got it. Still has a tail, looks like a frog, but it's got a tail. This kind of gives us information. So it gives us information about color. It gives information about size, body parts. What else? Sequence, right? Because those errors are talking about sequence. And just kind of like how the body looks, right? They could use words. They could say, well, it's kind of small and black and a little bit more slender, and then it gradually gets fatter and fatter, and then at the very end stage, it's really pretty fat, but it's also kind of long. Absolutely. But why use all those words when the picture can show us so much easier, right? Then over here, what is this information showing us? Well, it looks like there is a harbor. For some reason, there's kind of an old-fashioned ship. You can kind of see it in comparison to the skyscraper and some of the harbor cranes. So it shows us comparing old ships to new, ships to skyscrapers. Okay, shape of the ship, how many sails. If I could see more, it might be telling me even more. Okay, so then, okay, yeah, this is Thursday. I have here on Monday, but I forgot Monday we're actually not going to be here. So this is going to be on Tuesday. So there's no class on Monday because it's a Truth and Reconciliation Day. So we will not be here. No, sorry, I will Wednesday. Why? Here we go. Hang on. Tuesday. We're going to look at informational, or what I would also call procedural writing. This is writing that explains the steps involved on how to do something. Here is like a little online example of procedural writing, so you've had a chance to look at it before we do it. This one is talking about vegetable and flower gardens, how to start your spring seedlings. Let's see if I can kind of go there. We're almost done. Okay, so here we've got, yep, our title, our statements about things, they're numbered. So that would give me one example of something I could read to give me an idea of how to write procedural texts. Okay. Quick reminder, please do not wait until the end of a unit or the end of a course to hand things in. Because if you're having difficulties or are misunderstanding some things, then you may have to go back and fix everything, right? Whereas if you hand me in a few assignments and I can say, oh, yep, this is good, but I needed to fix this, it is so much easier for me and for you. And it's way less frustrating. It also usually improves your marks considerably. Because if I say, hey, you're not writing incomplete sentences and you've lost marks, then your next assignment, you write incomplete sentences. Or if I say, hey, remember that paragraphs need a space between them and they need to all be about the same topic, then most people use those tips the next time. So please, as much as you can, try to hand me in maybe like 4 or 5 assignments at most. Don't hand me in the entire unit because there's not much you can do. I mean, you can go back and change it, and sometimes people have had to, but it is really frustrating. Okay, so have a good weekend, and I will be here tomorrow if anybody wants to talk to me about an assignment, and I will talk to you guys next week.